Hello and welcome to another Every Tuesday tutorial. In this week's tutorial, we're going to be creating a holiday photo postcard in Photoshop. Since we're using a photo, you should be using Photoshop for this. And it's going to be completely print ready, so you can send it off to your online printer or your regular printer. And we're going to do this nice and quickly, and we're going to be using artwork that we created over the last couple of weeks, so it'll be really easy if you've already completed those tutorials. So as you can see, I'm using the ornament from last week, and another version could be the 3 ornaments together from last week, or you could also use the wreath that we created 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to show you how to put all these together. It'll be really quick and really easy. I'm going to be using the Glitz and Glam kit portions of it, brushes. Like you can see, I'm using the garland brush right here, and then I used the sparkle brush on this one. And we're also going to be using, these are some of the bonus elements that came with the kit. So I'll leave a link for that. I've got the wreath that we created 2 weeks ago. I've got that file open so we can easily bring that in. And then in Illustrator, I've got the bonus vectors since we're going to be using this little swirl, and the outcome from last week's tutorial. So we can just grab these, copy and paste them in, and we'll be good to go. So one thing you need to know about Photoshop is Photoshop does not apply bleeds to documents the way Illustrator and InDesign does. So we kind of have to manually do that, and I'll show you exactly how to do that, so you'll be totally cool with sending these to an online printer like moo.com or uprinting.com. I personally have had great luck with uprinting.com. Just make sure you use the matte paper when you have that option. So I'll leave links to those too in the video description. Okay, so we're going to create a 7 by 5 inch postcard, which can fit any A4 sized envelope, which is a really nice sturdy size. It's not too big and not too small. So I'm going to hit File, New. And we're going to change this to inches, and our width is going to be 7, and our height is going to be 5, our resolution is going to be 300, and our color mode is going to be CMYK because we would be getting this printed. So since we don't have any options down here to input our bleed, we need to manually add it to the main dimensions of our postcard. So since the standard is 1/8 of an inch. I'm really sorry, international people, because it's going to get kind of crazy, but inches is what I know, so I'm really sorry if this is confusing at all. Okay, so 1/8 of an inch on both sides equals 1/4 of an inch. So we need to add 1/4 of an inch to the height and to the width. So these are the dimensions that you want for this, and then just hit OK. All right, so now we have to actually drag our guidelines on so we can show where our bleed is, which will be really helpful to your printer. So I'm just going to zoom right in here, and you want to make sure your rulers are on. If you don't see them, you can get them by hitting Command R or Control R, and they'll just toggle on. And we want to drag out guidelines for 1/8 of an inch. So right here you can see this is 1 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/2 of a quarter is 1/8. So I'm just going to drag that here. Okay, so now we've got our guidelines drawn, and one last thing to mention is whenever you're creating layouts in general as a graphic designer, you don't want anything to be completely symmetrical, because if you draw a line right down the middle, you're not informing the viewer where to look first. So as you can see in the example right here, I've got the photo slightly larger than the text over here because I want the viewer to look at the photograph first before reading the messaging. So I'm just going to draw a guideline that's a little symmetrical just to make sure we stay on track with how we want our proportions or our scale of the photograph to the messaging. So over here, I'm just going to drag out, and typically right down the center would be right around 3 5/8. So I'm just going to go to 3 1/8 right around here. So you can see this part where it's going to contain the photograph is definitely larger than this part over here, which will contain our messaging. I'm going to double click on the background layer to unlock it, and I'm going to label it background. Next, I'm going to set a background color of that gray that we were using. So just make sure, click on this background color right here and set it to 25, 25, 25, or RGB values 37, 37, 37, or CMYK is over here. Hit OK. And then I'm just going to hit Command Delete or Control Backspace, and that will automatically color the background that color. Okay, so next we're going to bring in our photograph. So I'm going to go File, Place, and I'm going to grab Nuna, Place. Okay, so we want to make sure we scale her up enough to extend beyond our bleed line. So I'm just going to hold Shift, grab a corner node, and scale her up, the top and on the bottom. And now I'm going to center her between this guideline and this guideline, so she feels comfortable between there, because everything inside of the guidelines that we drew for the bleed, that's the portion of the postcard that will be printed. So I'm just going to center her, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so don't worry about this extra photograph over here. We're just going to mask it so you can't even see it. So just click on this little icon down here. That'll create a mask. You want to make sure your black is all the way in the back right here. And I'm going to hit M on my keyboard, and this is my marquee tool. So I'm just going to click and drag out a marquee. And then I'm just going to hit Command Delete or Control Backspace, and that will apply that color all the way to the back. So that masks it out. You can see right here. Next, we're going to bring in our wreath. So I'm going to come over here, and your wreath should be on its own layer, and I'm just going to make a copy of this folder. So I'm going to hold Alt, click, drag to make a copy, right click, convert to Smart Object. It's really important you convert to a Smart Object because when we click and drag it in, we obviously need to scale it up, and having it be a smart object will scale it up without any loss of resolution. So I'm going to hit Command T or Control T on a PC to free transform, hold Shift, click, and drag up your corner node. And now I'm just looking to see the space right here is similar to the space right here. And that looks pretty good to me. Knock it down a little bit. Okay, so next I'm going to set my text. I'm going to hit T on my keyboard and just type out Happy Holidays. This is called Evilith, the font that I'm using. It is a purchasable font. I'll leave a link to it if you don't want to purchase it. I have a nice alternate font that's free that I'll also leave a link to. Okay, and then I'm going to put in our names, the bigums, and then I'm going to put in our individual names. Spencer, Tila, and Nuna Petunia. Reduce this down to create some hierarchy. And then I also wanted to have some text that said from the, but I want to set it in a different font. So I'm just going to come over here and change it to Blackjack. And this one's a free script font, but I don't want the tracking to be 100. Like Evilith, my tracking was 100, so I'm going to hit 0. And I need to scale this up so you can actually read it. Okay, so next I want to make sure all of these are centered. So I'm going to click, hold Shift, and then click on this top layer to select them all. And then I'm going to click on this little icon up here, which will vertically align everything to the center. So that looks good. I'm going to put the bigums a little closer to our names. Push that up a little bit. So in the example, you saw how Happy Holidays was kind of at an arc. So we're going to do that right now. And we're just going to double click on your Happy Holidays T right there. And then you're going to click on this little icon up here to warp your text. And toggle down the style drop down and choose arc. And I like using 15% because it's kind of subtle. It's not too crazy. Hit OK. That looks good. And now we're just going to drag it down a little bit. And I want to apply this gold texture to our actual text. So I'm going to double click on Happy Holidays and apply it to this one first. So I'm going to use this hot foil texture right here, and I'm going to scale it down to 25%. Then I'm going to right click on this FX icon and choose Copy Layer Style. Then I'm going to click on this layer, hold Shift, click on the top layer, right click, paste layer style, and that'll apply that layer style to everything. Next, we need to bring in our little swirl. So I'm going to come over here, and from the Glitz and Glam bonus vectors, I'm going to grab the swirl. So Command C or Control C to copy. In Photoshop, Command V or Control V to paste it as a smart object. And now you can rotate it and scale it and make it fit exactly the way you want to. So it looks nice and pretty, almost like a little bow down here. I think that's why I like it so much. Okay, so we're going to apply a layer style to this as well. So let me label this first, swirl right, double click, pattern overlay. This time I'm going to use the silver version, scale it down to 25%, hit OK. Next I'm going to hold Alt, click as I'm dragging, I'm holding Shift to keep it straight, Command T or Control T to free transform, right click, flip horizontal, and then hit enter or return, and then just toggle it over so it matches. Okay, so our text is all set. I'm going to toggle it down just a little bit here So the last thing that we need to do is if I turn off my guidelines, you can do that by hitting Command semicolon or Control semicolon on a PC. And you can see I've kind of got a hard line right here. It's not too bad because portions of my photograph are dark. But if I want to add just a little more festive graphic right here, I'm going to use my garland brush that's part of the Glitz and Glam kit. So I'm going to create a new layer, hit B on my keyboard, and I'm going to grab my garland brush right here. Next, I'm going to reduce it down quite a bit. I'm going to make this kind of small and just kind of paint right on top of that divider line so it feels definitely more festive. Okay, once you're done, double click and we're going to make this that same gold pattern for consistency. Scale it down to 25%, hit OK. And now that's looking a lot more festive. I'm going to turn my guidelines back on. That's Command semicolon or Control semicolon. And now since this is poking out a little bit, I might want to move things to the left just slightly. So I'm going to do that. Okay. It's nice to zoom out a little bit and see how things are looking. All right, that's looking good. Okay, so the last things that we need to do is create different versions. If you want to use the wreath, you're totally done here. I'm going to turn off the wreath, and I'm going to jump into Illustrator, grab Rubber Band Select, my ornaments from last week, copy, paste, and scale them down, hold Shift. Keep them looking centered, and that could also be your greeting card. So that's a nice second option. The last option, we're just gonna hop back into Illustrator, grab this bulb, copy, paste, scale it down. Okay, so on my example, I had a little bit of sparkle going on in the background. So I just want to make sure, let me label this joyful. I want to create a layer right underneath it for the sparkle. So I'm going to hit B on my keyboard to grab my brush. This time I'm going to grab my sparkle brush, and I want it to be a little bit larger, not that large. And I'm just going to paint a little bit, and I don't want any of the sparkle to end up over here. So I'm just going to, when I get to this part, let me reduce that a little. I'm going to do these individually just by clicking. And you can scale your brush up by hitting the close bracket key on your keyboard, or you can scale it down by hitting the open bracket key on your keyboard. And I like, as I'm getting closer to the bottom of my card, I like reducing the sparkle as I go along. So it looks like the snow is getting further away. And you could even include some of the smaller ones up on the top too, just to add a little more variety. Okay, so that looks good, and now I'm just going to apply one more pattern to this. So I'm going to double click on my layer, pattern overlay. This time I'm going to use the silver jeweled, and I'm going to change my scale to 50%. But I want to send it to the back a little bit because this is looking really busy. So I'm going to reduce this down to 65% opacity just to fade it out a little bit. So the text and the ornament itself kind of comes forward a little more. You could even go down to 50 if you wanted. That looks good too. All right, I'm gonna hit OK, and there you go. That's 3 ways to do a holiday photo postcard in Photoshop using work that we've already done. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe. I release a new design tutorial every single Tuesday, and don't forget to head on over to my blog, every-tuesday.com, for even more design tutorials and a bunch of design freebies. And also be sure to check out the Glitz and Glam kit, which will make all of your holiday designs way easier to execute. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next week.